We have some breaking news for y'all today as we know that Atlas Intel, which is the most accurate pollster for 2020 and 2024 up to date, has released a poll that has Donald Trump up with a lead of 3 percentage points in a head-to-head competition versus Kamala Harris. Now, as you can see here, Kamala's lead in the total aggregate of all the polls, including the 80% of them which are liberally slanted, has Harris at a lead of less than a percentage point, which is the absolute lowest ever. I've made about 2 videos in a row saying this is actually the worst it's been for Harris. It is somehow snowballing into a inferno. Oxymoronic as that may sound, it is exactly what is happening. So again, Harris is down to a 0.9% lead, whereas usually she was up by 2 points, 1.9, 2.3, all sorts of things like that. And if you look at the most recent polling, we have plenty of examples where they're now showing Donald Trump winning the popular vote, which has never happened. And for the record, this is huge for a couple of reasons, but let's just look at the comparative analysis. October 20th, okay? About 2 weeks away from the election, I promise you, this is insane to think about, but we're about 15 or 16 days away from November 5th. As you can see here, on October 20th, Joe Biden was leading Donald Trump in the polls by 8.6 percentage points, and Hillary Clinton was leading Donald Trump by 6.4. Okay, now they both were wrong. Those elections were off. They were off polling wise. But the one poll that was pretty accurate actually was Atlas Intel. Atlas Intel had Trump losing by a narrow amount, which, look at the official results and those more or less line up. The average pollster was wrong by about 5 percentage points in 2020. Now, if they're wrong by that amount, Trump is winning massively, but even taking it at face value, he is still relatively strong when it comes to the odds of winning the election. Looking at all 7 of the battleground states, you'll notice that Donald Trump is in his strongest position he has ever been, especially when you include the Kamala race. Maybe, again, after the debate, people like Democrats were defecting from the plantation. They were saying, what the hell, our guy is cooked. Mentally, he's not there. But now that you have somebody who is also not there, but at least is not too old to have not have been there, but instead has been unburdened by what has been, they are at least, voting Democrat despite Trump. That being said, now that it's a fair competition, Trump is still leading by the most just impressive amount. Again, he's up by 1 point, which is more than usual. For the past several weeks, he's been up in this aggregate from like 0.1% to all the way to 0.7%. And I thought, wow, the zenith is really looking great. Turns out he's at 1%, which again is huge because this is getting all the swing states that actually matter in this election. No, it's not polling California. It's not polling Wyoming, the states that you already know are going to go a certain way, but instead they're getting the ones that actually sway the results in the Electoral College, like Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Again, 1 point victory, huge. Look at every line item here. Arizona by 1.6, Nevada by 0.8, Wisconsin by 0.2, Michigan by 1.2, Pennsylvania by 0.7, North Carolina by 0.5, and Georgia by 1.8. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Even look at the trend line. You see Trump is increasing very narrowly. Look at this this is like a Tony Hawk ramp. Okay, this looks fantastic. Look at this. Whoop. It's a V shape. You see that. Obviously when Joe Biden dropped out, Trump's numbers fell, and it was, the first part of a V, and you were even in the negatives. Kamala was winning the battlegrounds. But now it's actually the opposite, and that's brilliant to see. As you can see here, Red Eagle Politics, friend of the show, is someone who has been following this news somehow closer than me. Hard to believe, but it is so true. But as you can see here, he notes that this was the most accurate pollster Atlas Intel is. It's an international one, by the way, in 2020, but also the most accurate one in 2022. Now, a lot of liberals, Harry Sison, every page show for the DNC, let's say, for example, will cope and say, well, the polls have Trump winning, though, in 2022, they had the Republicans doing really well, that it was going to be a red wave. And were the polls wrong then? Yes. But actually, Atlas Intel, of the polls that existed back then 2 years ago, was the most accurate. And now the same liberals that say, oh, but the polls were wrong 2 years ago, well, the most accurate pollster was Atlas Intel, and they'll say, well, they have Trump winning, they're conservative. On what basis? On what basis? Who even runs Atlas Intel? How is it slanted conservative? Because Trump's winning? What is the bias here? And it's very obvious to see where these liberals are sourcing their opinions, but their own confirmation bias loop. It's a disgusting thing to watch. But like I said, 2022, hard. It was a polling miss for the right wing, generally. And I actually know why. So comment down below if you want to know the secret reason why. But generally, again, most accurate pollster. As a brief aside, maybe this is part of the reason why Donald Trump is gaining support among middle Americans, right? Can you imagine Kamala doing this? No, this is just aura. It's aura. He literally looks like he kind of looks like the owner of McDonald's, like, Colonel Sanders, like the old 70-year-old jolly fat white guy, okay? He kind of knows what the optics are, and he's the king of the optics, believe it or not, okay? So he is the greatest to ever do it when you really look at it, at it all. So some people might be asking themselves, well, is this too good to be true? Are we for certain that Donald Trump is actually winning by this much? I mean, it just seems so much like a pipe dream, maybe. But let's look at what the facts are. I literally have a 58-page PDF that I just have been reading through, and I'll explain to you why this is actually pretty accurate. As you can see here, it has over 4,000 people surveyed, which is quadruple what the average pollster does, by the way. And when you look at the margin of error, it's only 2.2, and they have him winning by 3. So what that means is that even if they're completely wrong and skewed to the left, in theory, that would still mean that Trump wins the popular vote by about 1 point, and that would clearly indicate a win in the Electoral College. But even looking at the demography at display here, you'll notice right now that you see these numbers. We're going to plug these into the swing-o-meter, and we're going to actually see if these mathematically bear out. Alright, so for some context, you have to understand that the swing-o-meter starts with the default 2020 results. So it shows the Democrats winning. So what we got to do is match what the Atlas poll is saying now as compared to what the 2020 results were, and we'll see how they contrast, okay? So let's start with the black vote. The black vote, it was at 12% turnout in 2020, okay? Kamala, despite being of color to some extent, clearly is somehow getting less black support, especially among young black men, than was Joe Biden. Yes, Uncle Joe was doing better with blacks. And in fact, I can see why. He had more aura. He had more charisma. But anyway, so the black share of the vote will go down from 12.1 to 10%, according to Atlas Intel. So when you move it to 10% without even changing the allotment of the support, all of a sudden, Trump actually already won the election. He already won the election. And where he would have lost the popular vote by 4.5, he is now losing it by only 2.6. Okay, so you can see that even the black turnout decreasing by 1 percentage point increases Trump's vote share by about a percentage point on the net, which is remarkable. The reason why this is the case is because black people, as a allotment of the proportion of the vote in the swing states, are concentrated in places that are important, such as North Carolina, Pennsylvania via Philadelphia, for instance, or Atlanta and Georgia, Milwaukee and Wisconsin, Detroit and Michigan, so on and so forth. Now, when you look at their share of the vote, though, you could argue that obviously, Trump got 9%, let's say, in 2020, 10% maybe. Now, his vote share should be going up this time to maybe 15%, and so that's pretty clear. So let's move his share of the vote up to 15. So in this case, we'd be moving Kamala's down by 5. So there you go. As you can see here, Donald Trump, again, gains more in the popular vote. Now he's only losing it by 1.9. Okay, as you can see here, he'd be winning Georgia by 7. He'd be winning North Carolina by 6. He'd be winning Pennsylvania by 1. Wisconsin by half a point. Michigan here is at a tenth of a percentage point within victory of Donald Trump. Arizona's a flip, and then Nevada is less than a half a point away. Now, to offset this, the Hispanic share of the vote, as we know, immigration demography changes, the Hispanic share of the vote is going to go up from 10.2 to 12. So let's increase that to 12. So this is bad news for Donald Trump, kind of. It depends on what new Hispanics end up voting. So you can see here, it flips back Arizona, but everything else stays about the same. Because again, Hispanics are not much of a factor in North Carolina, Wisconsin. So, it just depends. It's a give or take with different minority groups and how many whites are in that state, but there you go. Asians are at 2.9% of the vote versus the 4.3 here. So that's going to lower their turnout too. So let's go ahead and just lower it to 2.9. We flip Michigan. We flip Michigan off of that basis. Isn't that interesting? So, if you're freaking out at the screen, I just also manipulated, beside the race turnout of the election, I also manipulated the ages, the age dials, okay? So you have demographics like the Zoomers, millennials, etc. I adjusted it because the turnout will be different in allotment. There will be more younger people voting as compared to the old people relative to 2020. So if you just on paper increase the totals of young people voting, for example, Kamala goes up to 81 million votes and is beating Trump by about 4.5% in the popular vote and is back to 303 in the Electoral College. Now, don't be alarmed, as obviously there are some things to change here. Obviously, the differences in the partisanship of, for example, 18 to 29-year-olds is pretty drastic. So, for example, Trump here is losing the youth vote by 6%. Now, if you look to 2020, he was losing it, actually, by a good amount. As you can see here, he was losing them by 23. If he's only to lose them by 6, this changes the number by a metric crap ton. You can see here that he'd be doing about 17 points better in that case. So if that's true, then Trump is already winning the election off of that youth vote right there. But let's also look at people that were between 30 and 44 years old. Trump is winning those by about 15 points in 2024 in this new poll. Here, he's only winning them by about 14. So let's increase his share of the vote by 1 point there. Okay, let's look at 45 to 64. He's winning those people by 0.7. In this election, he's over here winning them by 5. So maybe this narrows a little bit, right? So suburban folk, you can narrow that down to there. So it looks a lot more even now that I fixed that. But let's go and address what percent of shift we see among the Hispanic vote and the Asian vote, and let's actually fine-tune the black support. So if we look at black support, for instance, down here, you'll notice that about, you would say that Kamala is leading Donald Trump by 35. So let's narrow this actually by more. Right now, she's leading him by 70 or 80 with the black vote. So let's actually fix this. Let's move this all the way to where she's only winning it by 35, in which case it'd be somewhere around here. Okay, so there you go. Trump also made historic gains in this poll with Hispanics. That would mean that he's only losing them by 11, where here, conversely, he's losing them by 23. So let's add 12 to the Trump column right here. There you go. Alrighty, folks. So I actually just set it all up. Very time consuming, but I love you guys in chat. So let's go ahead and like the video if you liked all the work I did for this one, because this is really a beauty. If you were to adjust and basically to the best of my capacity, translate the 50 pages of the back data for the Atlas Most Accurate Poll Ever survey, you'll notice that Trump would be winning with 312 electoral votes to Kamala's measly 226 electoral votes. You see that she's getting 73.2 million total votes, and Trump is getting 79.3. So he's beating her by about 6 million votes. In fact, he'd be getting 51%, whereas she'd be getting 47, which is about a 5-point victory. As you can see here, Trump does a little better with white people. He does noticeably better with black people. He does a lot better with Hispanics, and he does a little better with Asians, okay, down there at the bottom of that list. And so this is really brilliant. But let's look at every individual state as we wrap up here. Number one, as an aside, he's winning Florida by 13.4. Very cool. He's winning Georgia by 16, which I don't really believe is the case. I think it's mostly due to the black vote. So maybe we could adjust that later. But I mean, if you just take it for face value that he's getting 35% of the black vote, like Atlas is saying, then he would be winning it by a ton. That being said, I think most black support is not really going to turn out, which is really still a good thing, because if you remember, let's say in 2008, Obama unironically got over 90% of the black vote then. Like, that would actually go out and vote. Now it's going to look more like 2/3 of them are going to vote Kamala. About half of the other people are going to not vote in the election, and then Trump's going to end up with like 15, 18% of the vote, which is still over double what the average Republican gets, by the way. So still pretty good news. Georgia, probably not going to be that right wing. Not that it matters, because if you win it by one vote, that's what counts. North Carolina, huge victory. Pennsylvania, 4.5 Trump. That's pretty reasonable. You'll see states like Michigan, 3.9 points for the president. Wisconsin, 2.7% percentage points for Donald Trump. Nevada, 6.3 for Donald Trump. Arizona 6.1. But let's put in some other states, right? So New Mexico is 1.2% points away from flipping. You'll see a state such as California within 20 points at only 18% Democrat. Minnesota is only 3.8% vote percentage points Democrat. Illinois is within 9%. It's 8.3 for Harris. Virginia is only 0.3% for Harris in the scenario. New York is only a 13.4% win for Kamala Harris. And let's wrap it up with New Hampshire with only 6.1% for Harris. Nebraska 2nd District, 1 point for Harris Walls. And New Jersey, just the last one, 7.1 points for Kamala. So anyways, big results out of the Atlas poll survey. Comment down below if you have any disagreements or anything you want to say, and I'll get to your comments when I get to them. And like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And I'm going to be following this election to the death of me. And get ready for a cigar stream in a few weeks, okay? See y'all next time. Adios.